My girlfriend took my dog when we broke up, so I filed a case, got full custody, and she still cries on TikTok about pet rights. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I've always considered myself more of a dog person than a people person. My dog, Max, a golden retriever with this ridiculous way of tilting his head whenever I talked, was my constant. He was with me through every late-night breakup, bad day at work, and even my failed attempts at dating. Then I met her. Her name was Emily, and she had this magnetic energy that made you forget to breathe sometimes. We met at a friend's party, and honestly, I didn't expect much. But somehow, she and I clicked, like we were two puzzle pieces that had been sitting in the wrong boxes for years. Max took to her immediately, curling up on her feet like he'd known her forever. I thought, okay, maybe this could work. The early months were perfect. We'd spend weekends at the dog park, share late-night snacks on the couch, and plan adventures, where Max was basically the third wheel. She was affectionate, charming, and smart, but there were these little things. Tiny disagreements about how Max should be walked, what food he should eat, even arguments over which vet was better, that made me pause sometimes. At first, I brushed it off. Everyone has quirks, right? But looking back, I can see it. The first flickers of control masked as concern. She'd comment on how I spent time with Max, or subtly guilt-trip me for not following her rules about him. I ignored it, telling myself I was overthinking. But that's the thing about love and attachment. The closer you are to someone, the more vulnerable you become. I didn't realize that Max, my dog, my little constant, was going to be the wedge that would eventually tear us apart. It all started when we decided to move in together. And that's when things began to shift. Moving in together should have been exciting, right? Instead, it became a pressure cooker. At first, it was small stuff. Emily rearranging Max's bed without asking, leaving treats out that upset his stomach, or insisting on taking him for walks at odd hours. I tried to shrug it off, thinking it was just adjusting to living together. But her tone started shifting. Sharp, critical, even cold at times. One night I came home from work exhausted, and Emily was pacing the living room, Max sitting anxiously by her side. "You can't just leave him in his crate like that," she snapped, voice tight. I sighed, trying to stay calm. "I had a long day, Em. He's fine. He's safe." She rolled her eyes and muttered something about not knowing how to care for him properly. That little jab cut deeper than I expected. Over the next few weeks, the disagreements escalated. It wasn't just about Max anymore. It was about control, about who ran the household. I tried to reason, to compromise, but every attempt felt like a failure. I noticed her starting to make passive-aggressive posts online, vague captions about people who don't care about the things that matter most, and I realized she was spinning our arguments into public sympathy points. The breaking point came on a Friday night. We argued over taking Max to the vet for a routine checkup. I suggested a nearby clinic. She insisted on a more expensive one across town. It wasn't about money, it was about control. The fight spiraled, words getting sharper, voices louder. I remember Max whining, hiding under the couch, sensing the tension between us. By the end of the night, we weren't just arguing. We were unraveling. She told me, flatly, maybe we're not meant to be. And maybe Max would be better off with me. That line hit me like a punch. She wasn't just ending the relationship. She was hinting at taking the one being I loved unconditionally. I didn't know it yet, but that night was the start of a nightmare I couldn't have predicted. I woke up the next morning to silence. Usually, Max would be nudging me, whining for breakfast, but the bed felt emptier than usual. My stomach sank instantly. I ran to the living room. No Max, no Emily either. My heart started racing, panic clawing at my chest. Then I saw it. The crate was empty, a note taped to the top. "He's with me. I'll take good care of him. Don't worry," it read. "Don't worry?" My brain went blank. I stumbled to my phone and called her, my hands shaking. She answered casually, like nothing had happened. "Yeah, I took him. You've been too busy for him anyway. He's safer with me." I felt something inside me break. Shock, disbelief, anger, helplessness, all at once. Max wasn't just a pet, he was family. And suddenly I was staring at the possibility that I might never see him again. I asked, pleading, "Emily, please, this isn't fair. He's my dog too. We should discuss this." Her laugh was cold, dismissive. "Discuss? You had your chance. Now it's mine. Everyone knows I care more about him than you ever did." She hung up before I could reply. I ran to my friend's apartments, hoping she might have left a trail or someone could help, but she had vanished with Max. Social media soon added salt to the wound. Her posts about taking a stand for pet rights were everywhere, garnering sympathy from strangers who didn't know the full story. Each like, comment, and share was like another punch to my chest. That day, I realized this wasn't just a breakup. It was a battle for something I loved more than anything besides my own life. I had to figure out my next move fast, but I had no idea just how far this would escalate. Every plan I considered seemed impossible against her sudden, relentless control. And that's when the first thought hit me: legal action. Could I actually fight to get Max back? I spent the next day trying everything I could think of: calls, texts, even showing up at places I thought she might be. Every attempt was met with silence or dismissive replies. One text stood out: "Stop contacting me. Max is happier with me. You clearly don't understand what's best for him." My chest tightened reading those words. It wasn't just rejection. It was gaslighting, a way to make me doubt my own love for him. I called her that evening, trying to reason calmly. "Emily, he's my dog too. We made decisions together. You can't just take him." Her laugh crackled through the phone, sharp and cruel. "Decisions? You mean the ones where you forgot to feed him on time or left him alone while you went out? Max deserves better than you." She hung up before I could respond. My blood boiled, but it wasn't just private anymore. I noticed her posting on TikTok videos of Max with captions like, "When your owner doesn't care, I step up, gims, pet rights, better owner." Friends and even strangers began commenting, some subtly implying I was negligent. Suddenly, the narrative had shifted publicly. I wasn't just fighting for Max, I was fighting for my reputation as his owner. I began documenting everything: screenshots, vet records, messages. I knew I needed proof because this wasn't just about a pet anymore. It was about control and manipulation. My emotions swung wildly: anger, desperation, grief. Every time I saw a new TikTok, I felt like she was twisting the knife, performing her own version of the story for likes and sympathy. By the end of the day, I realized the situation had escalated far beyond what I imagined. Emily wasn't going to just return Max. She was setting the stage for a full-blown confrontation, and I had no idea just how far she would go to make me look like the bad guy. I sank onto my couch, Max's empty leash hanging by the door, and whispered to myself, "I have to get him back. But how?" That night, I couldn't sleep. Every scenario I ran through in my head ended with Max staying with her and me feeling powerless. I stared at his empty bed, imagining him looking up at her with those trusting eyes, thinking she was his whole world. That image made my chest tighten. I knew I couldn't just sit back and hope things would resolve themselves. I had to act. The next morning, I called a lawyer who specialized in pet custody disputes, a niche but apparently a thing, and explained the situation. "It's a legal gray area," he said, "but with proper documentation, you absolutely have a chance." Hearing that gave me a spark of hope, though it came with anxiety. Could I really fight her? Could I prove that I was the one who had cared for Max day in and day out, who had fed him, walked him, and been there when he was sick? I spent hours gathering evidence: vet bills, text messages, photos of walks, even time-stamped videos of feeding and playtime. Each memory was both comforting and painful. I could feel Max's presence in every frame, yet he wasn't there beside me. I called Emily one more time, trying one last time to appeal to reason. "Look, we can work something out. We both love him. He shouldn't be stuck in the middle." Her reply was calm, almost patronizing. "Don't bother. This is over. He's mine now." That was the moment I realized this wasn't about compromise. It was about control. She wasn't going to negotiate or acknowledge my love for Max. Every ounce of guilt I felt, every internal plea to let things slide, evaporated. I was determined. Filing the case wasn't just a legal decision. It was a declaration that I wouldn't be silenced or erased. I knew the road ahead would be brutal: social media battles, courtroom tension, and public scrutiny. But for Max, I was ready to fight. And in the back of my mind, a question lingered, gnawing at me. Could this fight actually make things worse before they got better? A few days later, I sat in my lawyer's office, paperwork spread across the desk like a battlefield. Filing the case was surreal. I had never imagined that a fight for a dog would feel like preparing for war, but here we were. My lawyer explained the process: service of notice, custody arguments, presenting evidence, and each step felt heavier than the last. Once Emily was served, her reaction shocked me. She posted a TikTok with Max in her lap, captioned, "Taking a stand for pet justice. Some people don't understand love. You pet rights ain't unhurt but caring." Views and comments started pouring in. Strangers were already taking sides, and almost all of them were sympathetic to her. I felt exposed, humiliated even, as if my private heartbreak had become a public spectacle. Early hearings were tense. Emily arrived with her friends and an entourage of social media advocates, making subtle glances and whispers meant to intimidate. I remember one of her friends smirking at me during a procedural discussion, and my heart sank. I had expected opposition, but the performative side of this, her online army, made it personal in a way I hadn't anticipated. Still, the first twist came when my lawyer presented the vet records I had meticulously collected. Proof of consistent care, vaccinations, and Max's behavioral assessments. The judge paused, leaning forward, clearly taking note. It was the first real validation I had felt in days, but I knew this was only the beginning. Emily countered with her own posts, framing herself as the nurturing one, casting me as negligent. By the end of the day, I felt like I was on a tightrope. One misstep, and the narrative could crumble completely. I drove home with Max's empty leash beside me, my mind racing. Could evidence really outweigh the viral sympathy she had built online? And more importantly, how far would she go to make sure I never got Max back? Just when I felt like the odds were stacked impossibly against me, an unexpected ally appeared. One of Emily's friends, someone I'd barely spoken to before, reached out with a message that changed everything. "I think you need to see this," she wrote, attaching screenshots of private conversations where Emily admitted she'd taken Max because she wanted control over me, not out of any real concern for him. My stomach dropped as I read each line. This was the evidence I didn't know existed, the kind that could turn the case. I remember pacing my living room, heart racing. I didn't know if I could trust this friend completely, but the screenshots looked authentic. They showed a side of Emily that contradicted every sympathetic TikTok she had posted. She wasn't the victim. She was manipulating the situation for attention, to make herself look heroic while painting me as irresponsible. That evening, I met with my lawyer, hands trembling as I laid out the new evidence. "This changes everything," he said, eyes widening. Suddenly, the strategy shifted. We could not only show consistent care and ownership of Max, but also prove intent on her part. It was a massive pivot, but with it came a new layer of tension. Social media, however, was a different battlefield. Emily continued posting, more dramatically than ever, making claims about abuse and emotional neglect, while the screenshots sat quietly on my phone. I felt the weight of potential public perception crushing me, even as hope flickered. By the time the next court date rolled around, I had a strange mix of dread and cautious optimism. For the first time, I sensed a real chance of victory, but also knew this could backfire spectacularly if anything went wrong. And just when I thought I had a foothold, Emily dropped a bombshell at a pre-hearing meeting, something so unexpected it left me frozen, unsure if I could recover in time. The day of the pre-hearing meeting started with what I can only describe as a punch to the gut. Emily arrived with a smirk, holding Max in her arms like a trophy. Then she dropped it. She had arranged a character witness, a mutual friend who claimed that I had been careless with Max, leaving him alone too often, and that Emily was clearly the more responsible owner. My stomach sank. I had anticipated resistance, but this public testimony felt like a betrayal of everything I'd worked for. I tried to speak up, to present my evidence, but the judge, hesitant and cautious, didn't seem fully convinced yet. Emily leaned back in her chair, smirking, occasionally glancing at her phone and scrolling, posting snippets of our interactions online. Every new comment, every like felt like a fresh stab in my chest. People I thought I could count on were starting to question me quietly, and I felt completely isolated. Walking out of that meeting, I felt defeated. For the first time, I doubted whether I could actually win Max back. Images of him curled up with her flashed in my mind, and my chest tightened with grief. I drove home in silence, staring at his empty bed through the rearview mirror, feeling the weight of hopelessness settle over me. I remember collapsing on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through Emily's TikTok videos. Each one was carefully crafted, tears, heartfelt captions, and claims that I was the neglectful one. The likes and comments kept rising, and it felt like the world had chosen sides. My mind raced. Maybe I lost him forever. Maybe this was never about Max at all. It was about me being powerless. That night, I sat on the floor, Max's leash lying beside me, and I couldn't stop the tears. I was exhausted, broken, and more alone than I had ever felt. And yet, somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. I had to find a way to turn this around, or I would never forgive myself. Little did I know, the next twist, one that would completely change the game, was just around the corner. After that devastating setback, I knew I had to change my approach. I couldn't just rely on evidence I already had. I needed to dig deeper, uncover everything that could prove Max belonged with me. My lawyer and I began an exhaustive review. Vet records, timestamps of walks and feeding, even photos of Max's behavior with me versus with Emily. Every little detail mattered. I also started quietly reaching out to mutual friends, people who had witnessed the dynamic firsthand. One by one, they confirmed what I already suspected. Emily had manipulated situations, taking Max whenever it suited her ego and posting dramatized content online to frame herself as the victim. Collecting these testimonies felt exhausting but empowering. Every story was another brick in the wall of evidence that could protect Max and restore justice. Meanwhile, Emily wasn't slowing down. Her TikTok videos became increasingly dramatic. She staged little, heartbreaking moments, captioned with hashtags like Yechu Pet Rights and Yuan, Abandoned Pup. Each post made my chest tighten, but I refused to engage publicly. I knew that stooping to her level would only give her more ammunition. Instead, I focused on building an airtight legal case that couldn't be twisted. The tension escalated as the next court date approached. I could feel my anxiety building daily, mixed with a strange sense of determination. For the first time in weeks, I felt some control returning. Every bit of evidence we had gathered, a detailed record of Max's care, corroborating witnesses, and her own contradictory social media posts, formed a strategy that could finally tip the scales in my favor. Driving to the courthouse that day, I gripped Max's empty leash in the passenger seat, imagining what it would feel like to finally hold him again. I reminded myself, the fight wasn't just about ownership. It was about truth, responsibility, and the bond I shared with him. But little did I know, the courtroom confrontation would be far more intense and dramatic than I had imagined. The courtroom felt heavier than I imagined, every creak of the floorboards echoing in my chest. Emily arrived with Max in her arms, her TikTok-ready tears perfectly timed for maximum effect. The judge called the session to order, and suddenly, it felt like everything I had worked for. Every photo, every message, every witness statement was on the line. Emily went first, painting a picture of me as negligent, claiming I wasn't capable of properly caring for Max. Her friends testified with carefully rehearsed lines, emphasizing my irresponsibility and her supposed devotion. I could feel my heart pounding as I listened. Max whined softly from her arms, sensing the tension, and I fought back tears. When it was my turn, I presented everything: vet records showing consistent care, time-stamped photos of walks, feeding logs, and my friends' testimonies about Emily's manipulative behavior. The judge leaned forward, scrutinizing each document, each contradiction in Emily's story. Then came the moment that shifted everything: the screenshots from her private messages, where she admitted taking Max to assert control over me. The courtroom went quiet. The tension in the room was palpable, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for a single crack to shatter the whole story. Emily fidgeted, trying to maintain her performance, but her earlier confidence began to crumble under the scrutiny. Every accusation she made was countered with evidence, and every sympathetic comment she tried to manufacture with her friends fell flat. I watched Max from across the courtroom. He looked anxious, but his tail wagged slightly when he caught my eye. It was a small reassurance, a silent reminder that this fight mattered because of him, not the social media drama. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves as my lawyer presented the final piece of evidence: timestamps showing that I had consistently cared for Max, and screenshots exposing her manipulation. The judge leaned back, scanning both sides, then asked Emily a question that left her momentarily speechless. "Do you admit you took this dog to assert control over the other party?" Her eyes darted, searching for a lifeline, but none came. The courtroom was silent, every whisper of doubt magnifying the moment. My chest tightened as I realized the tide had shifted. Finally, the judge announced that the court would deliberate. The minutes crawled by, each one stretching my nerves thinner. Emily stared at me with a mix of anger and disbelief, her carefully curated TikTok image cracking in real time. I gripped Max's empty leash, imagining the moment I'd finally have him back in my arms. When the verdict came, it was clear and decisive. Full custody of Max would go to me. Relief, joy, and vindication washed over me all at once. Emily's lips quivered, her tears no longer strategic but raw and bitter. She posted again on TikTok that night, crying about pet rights and claiming injustice, but this time the evidence was on my side, and the truth had prevailed. I finally realized that this wasn't just a legal victory, it was a reclaiming of peace, love, and control over the life I shared with Max. And even as Emily raged online, I knew the bond we had could never be broken. The moment the verdict was read, I felt my knees go weak. Max was technically mine again, and yet it felt surreal. I pictured him running to me, jumping and wagging his tail as if he knew the fight had ended. But even in that relief, there was tension. Emily's reaction was a storm waiting to break. True to form, she went online immediately. TikTok exploded with her tearful videos. "I can't believe the court took him from me. Eat your pet rights, you're unfair," and dozens of comments flooding in, some sympathetic, some critical. I felt a flicker of irritation. She was trying to frame herself as the victim again, but I forced myself to breathe. Max was safe. That was what mattered. Friends reached out, some having witnessed the courtroom scenes online, others just hearing about it. Their messages varied from congratulatory to curious. I didn't care about the attention. I cared about Max, his well-being, and finally, reclaiming our life together. When I got home, I opened the door slowly, calling his name softly. The moment he bounded into my arms, I felt a rush of love and relief that no social media post could ever replicate. I spent that evening just sitting on the floor with him, stroking his fur and whispering apologies for not being able to protect him sooner. The leash that had once symbolized despair now felt like a lifeline, a reminder of resilience and justice. I realized the court victory wasn't just about winning custody, it was about asserting that I mattered, that the love and care I had given Max counted for something real, not performative likes or online sympathy. Even as Emily continued posting, crying and trying to rally an audience, I chose silence. My victory wasn't a show, it was a quiet reclaiming of peace. Max curled up beside me that night, his warmth a reminder that some bonds are unbreakable, and that truth, care, and love ultimately carry more weight than anyone's curated online image. And for the first time in weeks, I slept without a pit in my stomach, knowing that this chapter, painful, dramatic, and emotionally exhausting, was finally mine to close. The days after the court victory were strange, quiet, almost surreal. Max and I settled into our old routines. Morning walks, lazy afternoons on the couch, late-night play sessions that left him panting and happy. Each moment felt like reclaiming a small piece of life that had been stolen from me. But even as peace returned, Emily continued posting online, tears, hashtags, and dramatic captions filling feeds. It was tempting to respond, to argue, to prove her wrong, but I realized I didn't need to. Max didn't care about TikTok likes. He cared about the person who had always been there for him. I started reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the manipulation, the humiliation. I remembered the nights I cried on the floor, feeling hopeless as her videos went viral, wondering if I'd lost Max forever. I remembered the court battles, the moments I felt completely alone, the fear that she had already won in the court of public opinion. And yet, here we were. I had endured, fought, and emerged with justice on my side. There was a strange satisfaction in knowing that Emily's theatrics couldn't undo the bond between Max and me. Social media could twist narratives and strangers could cheer for a performance, but truth and care are undeniable. I finally understood that sometimes winning isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming what's right, protecting those you love, and letting go of the need to control what others think. One afternoon, as Max nuzzled against my chest and let out a contented sigh, I smiled. For him, the fight was over, and for me, the healing had begun. Emily continued to post, cried, and complained, but it no longer mattered. Max was home, safe and happy, and that was enough. Looking back, I realized this ordeal taught me more than I expected. Love, patience, resilience, and the power of standing up for what matters most. And as I watched Max chase his favorite ball across the park, I whispered quietly to myself, "We made it, buddy. We really made it."